Were you forced to study hard? Did you manage to do well? My name is Jeremy, and this is the True Crime Chronicles channel. Today's story is a horrific and very high-profile case. Education drove this guy to madness.
Can I speak to your son?
Hello?
Sir, this is a 911 operator.
Okay.
Can you check? I asked her if she can do CPR. I can help you with that if someone needs assistance.
He's not breathing.
All right, do you want to do CPR?
I don't know. He's not breathing. He's not breathing, and I don't know.
This exact kind of frightening call was received by the 911 service on the morning of May 25, 2013, a day when Marshall University was celebrating the graduation of a new generation of professionals. Mark and Joanna McDermott were supposed to be among the parents of hundreds of students receiving their diplomas. However, their day took an unexpected turn. This is the story of Mark McDermott, a model family man who was betrayed by someone he, although not related by blood, considered and raised as his own son for nearly 20 years. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. Little is known about his upbringing and personal life, but it is known that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. The only known relatives are his father, Bruce McDermott, and 2 younger sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to some close acquaintances, Mark was not only a successful businessman, but also a kind and responsive person. Nicole described her older brother as a wonderful person who could never intentionally harm anyone. Very little is known about Mark's life, including his adult life. However, it is certain that at some point, he traveled to the southern United States. The circumstances and reasons for this trip remain unknown. It was in the US that he met Joanna Dunn, a single mother with a 4-year-old child. Even less information is available about Joanna's life, with most of what is known coming from her own accounts. However, the words she publicly shared were almost entirely dedicated to her son, who is the second main character in this story. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia, where he lived his entire life with his mother's family. His grandparents played a significant role in his childhood, as they cared for him for most of the time. The reason Joanna, a working single mother, entrusted much of Donald's upbringing to his grandparents was that she found it challenging to raise a child alone. Even when they did manage to spend time together, Joanna resorted to video games and television to entertain Donald on the rare days they were home together. It was difficult for her to give him all her attention. However, everything changed with Mark's entry into their lives. The couple quickly started a relationship, and soon after, they got married. Joanna took her husband's last name, and all 3 moved to West Virginia, becoming a very close-knit family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald had a very close relationship, as if they were truly related by blood. Some who knew them, including Mark's sisters and father, confidently said that Mark treated the boy as his own son, and Donald, in turn, regarded him as his only father. Their strong bond was tested when Donald was still a minor, and Mark and Joanna's relationship went through a difficult period, ending in a temporary separation. Despite Mark leaving alone for some time, Donald insisted on living with him rather than his mother during those months. The family had to endure another difficult period when Joanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, supporting each other, they managed to get through these tough times. Mark always made sure that his stepson had a comfortable life without any deprivation. He ensured that Donald never lacked anything he needed. Although Donald was a simple person who never asked for much, he seemed grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather provided him. In 2008, when Donald graduated from high school, Mark took on the financial responsibility for his higher education at Rio Nueva Community College, where he studied for 2 years. Mark continued to pay for his education even when, in 2010, Donald transferred to Marshall University. Despite the fact that Donald was living with his girlfriend, with whom he had been in a relationship since he was 15, and her family, he always enjoyed the unconditional support of Mark and Joanna. It's noteworthy that their financial assistance was not limited to just tuition fees. They also covered his expenses for clothing, car insurance, and paid for his living and food expenses. Donald only had to focus on his studies. A responsible and dedicated young man, he strictly followed his daily routine and often canceled or declined plans with loved ones, citing the need to complete practical work or review materials for upcoming exams. Throughout his 5 years of university education, he adhered to this lifestyle, aiming to graduate on time without falling behind in any semester. Saturday, May 25, 2013, was set to be a significant day for him to receive his university diploma. However, what was supposed to be a special occasion for celebration turned into a bitter moment that would forever change his life. As the McDermotts were preparing for Donald's graduation ceremony, a distressing call was made to 911 from their home.
What is your name?
Joanna McDermott, I shot my husband.
Okay, is he breathing?
No.
Was it an accident?
No, we were fighting.
You were fighting?
Yes, it was supposed to be a happy day. It's his graduation.
Your child's graduation? Okay, is your child okay?
Will the police be coming too?
Yes.
Authorities immediately headed to the McDermott's home. Sergeant Greg Keaton of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement representatives to arrive at the scene. Upon arrival, he found Joanna, who appeared to be in a state of severe shock. Moving further into the house, he saw Mark, who was lifelessly lying on the couch in the living room, seemingly reading a book at the time of his death. At first glance, the 54-year-old man had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. When investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound in the back of the shoulder. The medical examiner who arrived at the scene confirmed that although the cause of death was the head wounds, death was likely not instantaneous. The amount of blood at the scene indicated that the longer Mark was alive, the more blood he lost. According to initial versions of the incident, Donald was preparing for his significant day, and the noise of the shower drowned out the loud sound of the gunshot, so he did not realize that Joanna had shot his stepfather until he came out of the bathroom and found the body in the living room.
All right, how old is your husband?
My husband is 54.
And you were just fighting?
Yes.
All right, did you shoot him in the side?
No, in the head.
In the head?
Yes.
Okay, try not to touch the bed, okay?
My son is in the bathroom. I want to try to go downstairs so he can help me.
So, how old is your son?
23.
All right, does he know what happened?
No, he doesn't know. He's downstairs getting ready for graduation.
The pistol was lying on the dining table next to a letter, presumably written by Joanna and addressed to Donald. In it, the distraught woman explained to her son that her marriage had become unbearable, and that she could not remain in a relationship with someone she no longer loved. She also apologized for leaving his life without seeing him become a man. At that moment, Joanna and Donald were taken in separate cars to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office, where an officer was to take their statements. Since Joanna called the emergency services, the case appeared to be another instance of domestic violence with a tragic end. In her conversation with the operator, Joanna claimed that she and Mark had argued, and in a fit of rage, without realizing her actions, she shot him in the head with her pistol. This was unexpected to the officers who took her for questioning, as she then made a confession that overturned her initial version, and thus, the entire course of the investigation. When the doors of the police car closed, Joanna revealed that in reality, it wasn't she who deprived Mark of his life, but her son, Donald. However, this was not all that the woman could tell, as the story turned out to be much more complicated than the investigators had assumed. Once in the interrogation room, Joanna explained to Captain James Barr of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office the chronology of all the events that transpired on May 25, 2013. She mentioned that her son's graduation was scheduled for the early part of the day. In the morning, she had left to run some errands and buy groceries. Joanna returned home, and as she was about to get out of her car, Donald approached her and asked her to close her eyes and follow him into the house because he had a surprise for her. Trusting that her son had prepared something special, she blindly followed him into the dining room, where he suggested she sit down. At that moment, Joanna heard a distinctive click, and, when she finally turned to look at her son, she found herself face to face with the barrel of her own pistol, which was in Donald's hands. The gun did not fire, and Joanna, completely frightened, managed to grab it and wrest it from her son's hands. She managed to overcome her panic, which allowed her to think clearly and devise a plan of action to save herself from becoming Donald's second victim. Seeing Mark's lifeless body, she quickly told her son that she was going to call emergency services and take the blame for the crime. Although the young man initially seemed to doubt her plan, he eventually agreed. During the interrogation, Joanna explained that she decided to call emergency services to protect herself from her own son, understanding that by confessing to a crime she did not commit, she would end up behind bars. Joanna added that she was sure that if she didn't do this, Donald would try to end her life. She also confessed that in the 23 years she had been his mother, she never thought her son would point a gun at her head and pull the trigger. The gun used by Donald belonged to her, and she explained that the only reason it did not fire was probably because she had pulled the slide back far enough on the semi-automatic weapon, which prevents a normal shot. Captain Barr explained that Joanna's story seemed entirely logical to him because from the first moment he saw Donald, he had a feeling that something was off. He noted that considering the severity of the situation, the 23-year-old young man appeared unusually calm and always maintained a neutral facial expression. For this reason, he ordered Donald to be placed in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in the death of his stepfather, and this facade effortlessly crumbled after he was informed of Joanna's statements. James Barr did not have to resort to any intimidation tactics to get the young man to confess to the crime, nor did he have to pressure him or demand that he provide all the information to piece together all the details of the case. Donald voluntarily told him everything he wanted to know, and the story that unfolded was almost unbelievable. It all started after Donald finished his first year of college. Apparently, he was not doing very well in his studies and decided to drop out due to poor grades. He shared that initially, his classes were simple, and all he had to do was show up in the right room at the right time to get good grades. However, as the semester progressed, it required more and more effort. According to the young man, he felt that he did not have the strength to continue his studies. Instead of telling the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Joanna. However, his close relatives were not the only ones he deceived. His girlfriend and her family were also unaware of what was happening. According to Rachel Rush, his girlfriend's sister, Donald, maintained a routine that gave the impression he was attending classes. He would leave and return home at regular times and spent most of the day in his room. He asked not to be disturbed under the pretense that he needed to focus on finishing an assignment or preparing for a test. The young man even falsified his grade reports. All this was just a carefully thought-out deception that continued for 4.5 years. None of the people in Donald's life suspected he was lying to them. His family's faith in him remained unchanged throughout the years, while he pretended to be a student. Joanna and Mark had no idea their son was misusing the money they provided and supported him throughout, not only financially but also emotionally. Donald claimed that he never intended to lie to his close ones for so long, but as more days passed, telling the truth became harder. The one thing that held him back from being honest was the possibility that Mark and Joanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he seemingly did not attach much importance to many of his material possessions, such as a car and expensive clothes, in reality, he did not want to give up his lifestyle, considering he had a lot to lose if his parents found out the truth. Over several months, Donald developed what he thought was the perfect plan to get away with everything. From the beginning, he intended to end his parents' lives. To avoid suspicion, he planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table with the pistol. Donald thought that when the authorities read the note, they would conclude that the crime was committed by a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage who saw no other way out than to take her husband's life and then her own. Donald told Captain Barr that on May 25th, he surreptitiously took Joanna's pistol and kept it with him all day while pretending to prepare for his graduation. Before the second part of his plan failed, the young man decided to go to the supermarket so that the surveillance cameras would record him, thus providing him with an alibi. However, he did not anticipate that his mother's gun would jam at the moment he was about to pull the trigger, aiming at her head. Alex Willis, a close friend of Mark, told True Crime Daily that in the months leading up to this event, Donald had begun to show interest in shooting ranges. Although it seemed strange to him at the time, he never questioned it because it never occurred to him that the reason his friend wanted to learn more about firearms and how to shoot was his desire to attack the man who had raised him since he was 4 years old. The deliberations and conclusions that Donald reached baffled everyone who heard them. Later, James Barr shared that the young man confessed he had even planned the emotions he would display on his face when authorities arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would financially support himself after losing the stable income provided by Mark, and decided to exploit the sympathy of his relatives as long as he could while they supported him. He planned to engage in sports to improve his physical form and, ultimately, when he had no other choice, to enlist in the police or the army. Reflecting on the real chances of success for his plan, Donald decided it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for almost 5 years. According to a legal document from the Supreme Court of West Virginia, published in April 2016, a month after his arrest in June 2013, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought ways to delay the proceedings. A few weeks before the scheduled start of the hearings, the defendant, who was already in solitary confinement, had to undergo surgery on his right hand. His lawyers used the surgical intervention as a pretext to request a delay in the start of the process, arguing that during the initial sessions, Donald would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide on this matter, the court first required medical documents of the defendant. Eventually, the request was denied on the grounds that during the preliminary hearing, Donald showed no signs of being partially incapacitated due to painkillers. Therefore, the court deemed him competent to participate in the trial and approved the continuation of the established schedule. The trial took place in August 2014, more than a year after Mark's tragic death. The jury trial was presided over by Judge John A. Hutchinson, with David White serving as Donald's attorney and Christine Keller representing the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's 2 sisters, accompanied by one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to witness the trial of the man whom they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although detailed information from witness testimonies or evidence presented to the jury is not available, and there is a lack of photos and video materials, it is known that the defense wanted to include in their opening arguments that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there is no evidence that this was ever mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicological tests. A few days after the initial hearing, specifically on August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was found guilty of first-degree murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermott, attempted murder of his mother, Joanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. On September 5th of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole for the murder of his stepfather, and to 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his own mother. After the sentence was announced, Joanna read an emotional letter to the court that she had prepared. In her statement, Donald's mother mentioned that something bad had happened at some point in her son's life, possibly after the illness of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to study at the university, or the violent video games he played even when he was very young. She expressed her disapproval of the public image created of her son. She made it clear that she disagreed with the sentence handed down to him. But Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval had no impact on his decision. She made it clear that she disagreed with the sentence handed down to him, but Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval had no impact on his decision. He expressed his opinion that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, as even under the circumstances, she wanted to shield her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father expressed that they still could not understand how Donald could have taken the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Although the sentence would not bring back Mark, they were grateful for the verdict that was rendered. If you found this story interesting, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to write your opinion in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you in the next video.